Marcine.
Good morning,
Sister
Jody.
Marcine Klemm of note, because you are one of the few, or one of three that I know, vocations from Iowa.
Yes.
How did our sisters ever get to Iowa? Do you know that story?
I don't know the story there, but I know the school opened in a room above the Greenwood Market on Polk Boulevard in Des Moines in 1924. And some of my brothers and sisters were in the school there. And then when it was moved to 42nd and Grand to its present place, why then we continued providing students.
Yes.
Yeah.
And they
family
were all
members.
Klemms.
They were all Klemms.
Because
yes.
how many siblings?
There were 12 of us. There were 6 boys and 6 girls.
Oh, my heavens. Oh, my heavens.
Yes.
Did they all have AAA batteries installed in them like you?
I think we were born with it.
Because you never stop. And may I ask your age at this?
At this point, I'm 88.
88. Will you say that very humbly?
Well, I'm there. I can't take it back or anything.
Did your parents have these genes also?
No, they didn't. My dad died when he was 69, and my mother died when she was 74. And Janine died when she was 74. My brother Dick passed away. He was 59 when he died. Jim was in his 80s. Francis was in, I forget, I think he was in his late 70s. But we have heart in the family, and practically all of them have died from.
And Jean Agnes lived the
Jean
longest.
Agnes was she was the 7th one, and I guess the 8th one, because there was Jimmy and Dickie and Johnny and myself then that came after her.
And you are all living, obviously.
I'm the only survivor right now.
Oh, really?
Yes, yes.
Oh, how many nieces and nephews must you have?
Well, we have them scattered throughout, you know, and I think we're in the 20s with nieces and nephews, and then we have several grandnieces and nephews too that I try to get around and visit in the summertime.
Well, when you go back to Iowa, with whom do you stay?
All of them.
Do you warn them ahead of time?
I warn them ahead of time I'm coming, and I ask for hospitality, so they kind of have things lined up. Yes.
Well, what does your AAA battery allow you to be involved in this very week or this very year?
Yeah. Of what now? Well, since I've come to Adrian, retired naturally. But it was interesting. One of the young women from Siena, my last mission was being administrative assistant to Sharon Weber at Siena. And when I left there was a young woman who had been taking care of the dire need office at St. Mary's.
The parish here in town.
The parish, exactly. And when she was moving away, and she said, you would be good there. And so I went from Sharon's office to the dire need office and have been there since 98, I guess.
Oh, my. Wow, that's what, 28 years?
No, 98.
98.
98, well, that's 2 there and then 6.
Yeah. Oh.
Yeah.
Is your name up there on the door?
No. We don't want to
Klemm,
advertise it too much because we don't have the money to go around for the whole world. But, we try to take care of those who do come in.
Well, I remember the former pastor, Bob Schramm, saying how moved he was at the in 2008, with the slump in the economy of how many church members who had been giving money were now asking for help.
Yep. Yes.
Yes.
Right. That's true.
Yeah.
You know, I have to go back on that. It wasn't in the 90s. It was in the 80s. It was in the 2000s.
Oh, okay.
It was 2008, I think, when I left Siena. So it's only been about 8 years that I've been there at St. Mary's.
Okay.
Yeah, but it's a definitely a needed office there. We do have many people that are in dire need.
Mm-hmm.
And that's what they call the office, the dire need office. But
What-
they also have the food pantry
Yeah.
that is daily with a heavy load.
So people can donate to the Dire Need Fund, is that
They
it?
can. And I've had a couple fudge sales, you know, with Snicky Snackies and all of that, and the proceeds from that go to the dire need.
Oh, well, everyone should know that. I don't know if people know that when you're doing all your
Well, I
wonderful...
usually have on the bottom when I announce the days that they're
okay.
going to have the sale, that the proceeds go to the dire need office. That's St.
Because you're
Mary's.
always baking.
Well, not always, but when I do, it's a heavy load. It's a good week. A good week that I'm doing that.
Well, how old were you when you decided to follow the road that Sister Janine and Sister Jean Agnes had taken?
Well, it's interesting. All three of us, even my mother, graduated from St. Joseph Academy in Des Moines. The BVMs were there.
In Des Moines.
In Des Moines, and the BVMs were there.
Mm-hmm.
And when I got to thinking about going to the convent, I was quite fond of Sister Ellen Neese, the BVM, and I was thinking of going to the BVMs because I didn't want people to think I couldn't make up my mind, and my sisters were calling me into the Dominicans or dragging me in, whatever you want to call it. And so on Holy Week, each year, the seniors at the Academy always had a special retreat to kind of prepare them, like think of what they're going to do after they graduate in a couple months and so on. And so we had that retreat, and on Easter Sunday morning, and after Mom and I came home from church, she said, well, you had your retreat. Have you decided what you're going to do? And I said, yes, I think I want to go to the convent. Because having Janine and Jean Agnes, the sisters would sometimes, when I was in grade school at St. Augustine's, particularly in the 7th and 8th grade, if a sister was sick, they would call upon me to go down to the 1st or 2nd grade and, you know, be with the kids, and that kind of sparked the desire. And so anyway, Mom said, well, what are you going to do? And I said, I think I'm going to go to the convent. She said, I'll be so proud to have 3 Dominican daughters. So BVM's out the window. And so here
That was the decision.
So that was the decision. I thought, I'm the last one leaving the nest. How could I ever tell her I'm not going to be a Dominican? And she also was a Dominican tertiary.
Oh,
she prayed her
beautiful.
office and rosary every day. Yeah.
Oh my, how could you not?
So that's
How could
exactly.
you not?
Yes.
Did any of your brothers become a priest?
I had one that I think was inclined, but then he was drafted in the late 40s or the mid 40s, really. And when he came back from the war, he didn't pursue that any longer.
What did your poor father do to support the
Well,
large family?
You know, our family was kind of like a double family. My dad in the early 90s, and to get back, not the early, well, it was the early 90s. He and Mom were married, what, in 1912 or something like that. That's when the first twins were born. He had his own business and really quite prosperous. But come the big slump there in the early 1930s, he lost
Depression.
everything.
Oh, boy.
Everyone was rushing to the banks to take out their money, and he trusted the government, he trusted everything, and he lost everything. And at that same time, Prohibition came in, and he unfortunately started on drinking. So I only knew him as an alcoholic person. You know, and very irrational, sometimes lovey-dovey, and sometimes it's very, very stern and very strong, you know.
Well,
And so-
imagine men in that who were the bring home the bacon people, how depressed they must have been, not having a job.
That part is true, and the other thing is that my brothers, when they started working and so on, helped support Mom, really. And she crocheted like crazy.
As you do.
My dad used to say that if he didn't hide his shorts, that she'd have lace crocheted around the legs of those. But she was very ingenious, very creative.
I bet she made your clothes, too.
No, my sister Billy did the sewing in the family and made lots of dresses for me. Because growing up with the boys, I got their hand-me-downs. I grew up in blue jeans and flannel shirts.
That belonged to the
that were the
boys.
hand-me-downs from the boys, yes. And so my sister Billy tried to dress me up, and she did make me several dresses. Yeah,
What was your baptismal name, Marcine?
Janine Treese.
Oh.
Treese, because I was a difficult birth, came feet first, running ever since. But and then also was the time that the song came out, Janine, I Dream of Lilac Time.
Oh my!
And Mom chose Janine for me. And then when Charlotte entered, she took my name.
Yes.
For baby sister.
Well, how did the name Marcine come about?
I had at the time that I was entering, my brother and his wife had a baby that was born dead, and they were going to call her Marcia.
Oh.
But I was going to take the baby's name, but we already had a Sister Marcia. And so Janine came up with Marcine. She said, you want a single name. She says, by the time you write your name on all those papers of the kids, the white sheets we used to have at that time, she said, you want a short name. So
And you've been happy ever since.
Right.
Yeah.
And then, of course, when we were able to go back to our baptismal names,
That would be confusing.
It'd be very confusing
Yeah.
to have two Janine Klemms in the same community. Yeah.
What has been your favorite mission through the years?
I think probably the one that I found most challenging and yet most rewarding was the 4 years that I spent in the Philippines with the Dominican Sisters of Our Lady of Remedies, who has since become Adrian Dominicans.
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah. You're like one of their founders.
Well, and
Did you go with Mary Phillip?
No, Mary Phillip and Ellen Vincent were over there, and when Mary Phillip came back for the chapter of 1968, she was ill and she had surgery, and she spoke with Sister Rosemary to say that she thought it was time that they would come back and someone else would go over. And what I thought was remarkable, not so much at the time, but as time went on, Sister Rosemary Ferguson had become our Mother General, our Prioress at that time. And she asked me if I would be interested. I was not told to go. Wow. And then later on, when it got time to leave and so on, I went to her and to talk about a bit, and I said, what do you want me to do when I go there? And she said, you just go and see what needs to be done.
Wow.
And I look back on that as such
a grace.
Graced instructions, yes, because never be able to take from this standpoint to what was in the Philippines to be able to say what you're going to do over there. And
oh, that's deep in your heart, isn't it?
yeah,
I can tell.
it is.
Did one of our sisters go with you, or were you by yourself?
Sister Rosemary Marcin went over with me. And she was there for 3 years. We were there together for 3 years. And when she came back, I had come back to the States one summer to take advantage of the theological studies they were having at Weber and so on, to get in on that, and then just to have a little
vacation,
reprieve and get back in with the congregation. And then the following year, Rosemary was to come. And I was not aware of the fact at all that she had no intentions of coming back.
Oh, that
so
hurt.
it was it was kind of a shock, and it was a very difficult situation for the sisters for a while, because the sisters did, particularly the novices, did love Rosemary. She was very sweet and gentle with them in the classes that they had, and I enjoyed her too as a companion, you know, in this venture that.
I bet you were thrilled when we joined forces. To,
well,
you know, would you say it's a merge or a marriage?
I think probably it was an adoption.
Adoption. Yes.
But the other thing too, Sister Mary Lou Putro came through the military to be religious ed director there at Clark Air Force Base.
In the Philippines.
In the Philippines.
Oh.
So we had some rapport there
Yeah.
and go over there for a good meal and so on, once in a while. So Mary Lou was part of our life over there as well. And
my.
we met some of the family members because we were asked. Mary Phil and Ellen Vincent were doing some of the catechetical, I suppose you'd call it, religious education, and that kind of fell to Rosemary. I mean to Mary.
Mary Lou.
Mary Lou. No, Mary Lou wasn't there yet.
Oh, okay.
But kind of fell to Rosemary and myself. And
At the base.
At the base.
Okay.
So that got us an inroad there to meet with some of the Americans.
Well, what an incredible experience.
Yeah, it was.
Oh my! and you remain close to the sisters today.
Yes,
you know them
yes.
all, don't you?
Well, there are several of them that have through the years have joined the community, and I was not part of their lives, but the visits that I've had back for their Golden Jubilee, and I was there for their Silver Jubilee as well. And
you go bearing gifts also.
Well, bearing gifts or shipping gifts.
I have a vague remembrance of you being in the Southwest also of the United States.
I was down in Texas. I was never any further west than
okay.
Texas. I was down at the Mexican American Cultural Center when it first started in 1972. I had just come back from the Philippines, and Father Virgil Elizondo, who was the founder of the Mexican American Cultural Center, had been in the Philippines, and we were together at the study there at the Ateneo, because when I first went there, it was the beginning of Vatican II and the education, and he was part of that pastoral experience, because he was planning on developing something like that in San Antonio for the Hispanics that are there. And so then when I came back from the Philippines, and Virgil learned that I was footloose and fancy-free, that he invited me to come down there. So I was there with the first 4 years of the Mexican American Cultural Center as well.
Was Dorothy Folliard there?
Dorothy Folliard came, and Marie Therese Creighton was there before myself. She was there. She had met Bishop Flores at some meeting and so on, and of course she had been in Puerto Rico and knew fluent in Spanish, and so the Spirit worked, and so she was there, I think, about 2 years before I went there, and the program then was becoming more established and settled, and more students coming.
Are you fluent in Spanish?
No, I'm not. I blubbed my way through it. No. I was in Puerto Rico too, and I went from teaching 3rd grade and having a Spanish lesson every evening after school and before school with Margaret Mary McGill, with Agnes Carroll. Yes, yes, yes. Because she was very well.
Was that in San Juan?
This was in Guayama.
Guayama,
as they called it down there.
They call it what?
Guayama.
Oh.
We can put pajamas in.
Like pajamas, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So I've had a very interesting life, and then so
were
some of that background.
Were you not in charge of the overseas missions at some point?
No, I wasn't. When Pat Johnson was in that office, the first year that I came back from the Philippines, I was
worked with her.
I worked with her.
Yeah, maybe that's what I'm thinking of.
Yes. And I did go down to Guatemala with her. We went down to visit Patty Shaw, who was down there with the Mary Knowlers, and they were very much into herbal medicines and so on. And Patty was interested in the nursing aspect of it, and learning the different leaves and plants and so on that could be used medicinally. When the people couldn't afford, the prescription drugs and so on,
Were you able to be present this summer for? Oh, no, it was in the fall, I believe, when Patty Shaw received an
yes, I
alumni
was.
award at
Right.
Siena Heights University.
Yes, and the following day I had a dinner with her and Dan, and yeah, we had a good visit.
Yes.
Yeah.
Is she feeling better, or is this a
I
perpetual?
wasn't aware of the fact that she had been ill, but yeah, she had a very, what do I say?
Reaction to
medicines that really set her back and that weakened her considerably. But she was recuperating from that, but I think she was much better. She was be able to walk around and so on with the assistance of Dan and a cane, whereas before I think she was really confined to a wheelchair.
God bless her.
Yeah.
Marcine, you've met a lot of interesting people in your life.
I have.
Yes. Could you name 3 that you'd like to be present right here in this room now?
Well,
3
I
or
think
4.
one that I'm sorry I couldn't understand more, who came to the Cultural Center, was Gustavo Gutierrez, when his whole program, was starting in South America, and he was receiving a lot of opposition and criticism and so on. But he had come there to teach, and he was such a humble, gentle guy. I enjoyed, knowing him and doing that. And
is that the liberation
liberation
theologian?
theology? Yes. Yes. And then, as a result of that experience, when I was in Sharon's office, we were able at Siena to give him what do you call it? Their honorary degrees at Siena.
I do remember that.
Yes.
Yes. Oh, what a gift!
Yes.
What a
so
gift.
that was
That's
that
one
was something
person.
special.
Now,
yes. And then I was delighted in time when Gustavo then entered the Dominican order. So he's a Dominican priest. Now that happened several years ago. And when Father Virgil was teaching at Notre Dame, he invited Gustavo there several times to kind of add to the program that he was teaching, the pastoral ministry and outreach to the different ethnic groups, and particularly the Hispanics and Mexicans in this country.
didn't you recently go back to San Antonio for a funeral?
I went back for Father Virgil's funeral, right, yes.
How old was he when he passed?
He was 80. He was 80. And of course that's very sad because he did take his own life.
Oh, I didn't realize that.
He had reached the point, he had always had problems with his eyesight. His eyes weakened, and tired very easily. And in his later years, he was almost blind. He could work with the bright lights, if he had that. But he had written so many books and had made, he was an international figure as well. And in the letter that he wrote to his sister, he said, that his body was failing him and his eyesight, he couldn't read anymore. And he did not want to be a burden to her. Wow. And so he took his own life. But there was a tremendous celebration down there. And I would say several more after I had been there. We were there for the initial burial, funeral service. And the bishop spoke very highly of him and, in his work. And there was an accusation of improper behavior with a seminarian 30 years ago. And I was down there at that time. And, any of my experiences with him, that was not Virgil. That was not Virgil.
So you've mentioned 2 people that have inspired you throughout your life. Is there a third you'd like to mention?
Well, I think my 2 sisters, both of them are very creative in different ways, and they're different as can be. Jeanine and I are such extroverts, and Jean Agnes was such an introvert, that we'd say, are we going to go shopping? Well, Jeanine and I could be out and have the shopping done and be back before Jean Agnes make up her mind to go. so I would say that was more of a strain on her than it was on us. Yeah. But I did enjoy them in the later years when I was able to be an Adrian. And
what was their favorite name for you?
Beanie. That was in the family, right? And that started way back when I first started school, because at home, with the large family that we had, Mom and Dad bought by cases, you know.
The bean.
And I like the pork and beans. And my brothers and sisters would have peanut butter and jelly on their sandwiches for lunch, taking it to school. And I would have pork and beans. And so they said, this is one big bean, you know. So Beanie started, and
It has stuck through
right,
the years.
yes, and then
Yeah.
particularly when Janine took my name, then to differentiate between the two of us, Beanie really stuck.
From whence came your love of dogs?
Oh, I think I've always had a love of animals. My even my background in teaching and so on was in sciences, in biology, physiology, and so on. And I always loved animals. In my biology lab at Hoban, when I was there, I had a couple of hamsters, and what was the other thing? I think they were the hamsters that I had there. Oh, and then at Easter time, Father Nowicki, who was the superintendent of Catholic schools there, lived at the campus at Hoban. And he gave us a rabbit for Easter. So naturally that ended up
in your room.
in the lab also. But I've just been fascinated with animals and so on all the way
And
through.
your current love is Babe.
And the current love is that little 4-pound black poodle, yes, toy poodle.
Yes, yes.
That entertains the sisters as well as myself.
Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yes.
And you have, what shall I say, had someone adopt him?
Well, our neighbor down the street, Marion, had worked for us on campus. And so we knew her from living on Prairie Drive out there at the airport area in Adrian. And their dog died. And then when Jean Agnes became ill and came on campus, and I decided to move, that the house was too much for me to take care of, and the grounds and everything, that was going to come on campus, and I couldn't bring Babe. But I was talking with Marion, and she said, oh, we'd be glad to take her.
Oh.
So they did, and then I borrow her back on Saturdays where we can have Babe Day.
Babe Day.
and
And
the
she's
sisters
about
come down.
2 inches long.
Oh, no, she's a little longer than that.
The tiniest one I've
I know,
ever
but she's
seen.
very, very
Yeah.
sociable, and really, the sisters love her because they can pet her.
Yes.
I know they have some of the other dogs that come in, and they can pet them because they're larger and so on. But Babe, they can hold in their lap. And,
Well, before we end our interview, Marcine, in the name of all of our sisters, I want to thank you for your spirit, your joy, your humor, and your incredible ministries that you continue to bring love to everyone you meet. So thank you for that.
I think every single one of us try to do that, and I see them involved in that as they're going into the sisters that can no longer read, and they will read for them, or do cards for them,
Yes.
or just sit and visit with them, or go in and pray with them.
Yes.
That I mean, we're there for one another and for whatever has come up.
Amen.
Amen.